There are three children of Michael Jackson, three people who shared his name, his roof, his life, and when Hollywood came knocking, ready to tell the world the story of their father, each one made a different choice. One walked onto set every day, one stayed silent and watched from a distance, and one looked at the script, saw what was written, and walked away. That last one was Paris Jackson. And what she said when she finally spoke after months of silence wasn't just a personal statement. It was a window into something far bigger. Who gets to control a legacy? Who gets to shape the narrative of a life? And whether the most official version of a story is ever actually the true one. When Lionsgate officially announced the Michael Jackson biopic in February 2022, the reaction was immediate. Fans flooded social media. Entertainment journalists called it one of the most anticipated films of the decade. And the credentials were impressive. Antoine Fuqua directing, Oscar-nominated screenwriter John Logan on the script, and full cooperation from the Jackson estate. The music rights, the archive footage, all of it officially sanctioned. Michael's nephew Jafar Jackson was cast in the title role after a 2-year casting process. His grandmother Katherine Jackson publicly approved, saying he embodies her son. And then came the detail that seemed to seal the deal on the film's authenticity. Michael Jackson's eldest child, Prince Jackson, was named as an executive producer. Prince, Michael's own son, on set, involved in development. A living connection to the man at the center of the story. To the outside world, this looked like the ultimate stamp of legitimacy. If the family was on board, surely the film would tell the real story. But inside that family, something very different was happening. Producer Graham King confirmed in an interview with The Hollywood Reporter that Prince Jackson was on set every day during filming and was deeply involved in the film's development. Prince spoke openly about what the experience meant to him. He said the movie was meant to show audiences a side of his father they may not have seen before. For those who were too young to experience that era of Michael Jackson's career, he hoped the film would contextualize the growth, the rise to stardom, and the hard work his father put in. He also described the emotional shock of seeing his cousin Jafar step into the role, moments where he had to step outside to get some air, because watching Jafar, he felt as though he was seeing his father again. By every public measure, Prince Jackson fully endorsed what Antoine Fuqua and Graham King had made. That's the picture the studio wanted the world to see. But here's what most people never heard. His sister saw the same story and reached a completely different conclusion. It started with a moment that seemed minor. In August 2025, actor Coleman Domingo, cast as Joe Jackson, was attending the Amphar Gala at the Venice Film Festival. Speaking to People magazine, he said Paris and Prince were very much in support of the film, and described Paris as nothing but lovely and warm. Paris Jackson saw it differently. She went to Instagram and wrote, "Don't be telling people I was helpful on the set of a movie I had 0% involvement in. Lol. That is so weird." She wasn't just correcting a minor misattribution, she was drawing a hard public line. She explained what had actually happened. "I read one of the first drafts of the script and gave my notes about what was dishonest and what didn't sit right with me. And when they didn't address it, I moved on with my life. Not my monkeys, not my circus. God bless and Godspeed." Read that carefully. She engaged with the process. She flagged specific problems. She gave written notes on what she believed was dishonest in the script. And then she was told in effect, "We've heard you. We're moving forward anyway." That's not support. That's dismissal. A few weeks later, Paris went further in a series of Instagram videos. Not angry, not hysterical, but deliberate. Someone who had thought about this for a long time. She said, "I just butted out and left it alone. Because it's not my project. They're going to make whatever they're going to make." And then came the line that reframed everything. "A big section of the film," she said, "panders to a very specific section of her dad's fandom that still lives in a fantasy, and those fans are going to be happy with it." She wasn't just criticizing the film, she was identifying a structural choice, a deliberate decision about which version of Michael Jackson the filmmakers wanted to present, and which audience they wanted to serve. And then she named it directly. The narrative is being controlled, and there's a lot of inaccuracy, and there's a lot of just full-blown lies. At the end of the day, that doesn't really fly with me. I don't really like dishonesty. I spoke up. I wasn't heard. Full-blown lies. Controlled narrative. Sold as real. These are not vague criticisms. These are specific allegations from someone who read the script, objected to specific content, was told no, and is now speaking on record. Then there's Biggie, Michael's youngest child, the one the world knew for years as Blanket. The quietest of the three, someone who has maintained a level of privacy that neither Paris nor Prince managed. When the biopic premiered, Biggie attended the film's premiere in Germany. But he didn't endorse it, he didn't speak about it. His presence at a premiere far from the Los Angeles red carpet was the most carefully ambiguous statement he could have made. He was there, But he wasn't there in the way Prince was there. So you have three children of Michael Jackson making three distinct choices. Prince, fully in, executive producer, on set every day, publicly emotional. Paris, read the script, gave notes, was ignored, publicly called it dishonest. Biggie appeared at one premiere, said nothing. That split within a single family tells you something important about the film itself. If it were as unambiguous as the studio suggested, would you expect this level of internal fracture? Here's what makes Paris's position even more significant when you look at what the film actually covers and what it doesn't. The film spans Michael Jackson's life from the 1960s through the Bad World Tour in the late 1980s. Everything that came after, the 1993 allegations, the civil settlement, the 2005 criminal trial, the final years, none of it is in this film. That's a deliberate structural choice. But there's more. Puck reported that the project's third act had to be reworked because it featured a dramatization of a person who had accused Jackson of child sexual abuse. In that accuser's settlement, the estate had assured he would never be depicted in any dramatization, so the film went through significant reshoots. The numbers alone tell a story. The original budget for Michael was reportedly around $150 million. After the reshoots, 22 additional days of photography that took place in June 2025, that figure grew to an estimated $200 million. A new ending alone reportedly cost around $50 million, making it one of the most expensive biopics ever produced. Lionsgate denied the film was in chaos. Variety reported the reshoots only added $10 to $15 million, funded directly by the Jackson estate. So you have two different accounts of how much this restructuring cost and who paid for it. What both accounts agree on: the film had to be rebuilt. Significant portions of what was originally shot could not be used. And the version that finally reached theaters in April 2026, after the original April 2025 release date was pushed back an entire year, was meaningfully different from what had been planned. Paris Jackson, watching all of this from the outside, asked a pointed question: why was the film ever made in a way that created these problems in the first place? It's a fair question, and nobody in the production gave a satisfying public answer. What remained was, as the producer himself essentially confirmed, a portrait of triumph. Graham King told The Hollywood Reporter at the April 2026 Los Angeles premiere, "Mike is a complicated person. People have complicated opinions, and that's fine. We chose to tell the uplifting story of his triumph in the movie, and that's what we did. We chose." That is, in some ways, an admirably honest statement. But it's also a direct answer to Paris Jackson's objection before she even raised it. You had a complicated story in front of you. You chose one version, and when someone who knew the man said this doesn't reflect the truth, you moved on anyway. What happened next reveals how complicated the territory around Michael Jackson's legacy has actually become. Paris Jackson is not simply on the same side as the estate. She is currently in a legal battle with her father's estate over financial matters. When Paris questioned why the film was made in a way that created legal problems, the estate fired back, stating that she had a complete lack of understanding about how the motion picture industry works. In a March 2026 court filing obtained by Deadline, the estate wrote, "It is unfortunate that Paris's team makes false and frivolous objections, considering Paris has and will continue to benefit substantially from the tireless work of the executors. So now the picture becomes even clearer and more uncomfortable." The institution managing Michael Jackson's name, music, and commercial interests is in active legal conflict with his daughter while simultaneously producing the biopic that claims to represent his legacy. Prince is aligned with the estate. Paris is in court against the estate. When you see it through that lens, Paris's comments take on an additional layer of meaning. Her objections weren't just creative or emotional. They were coming from someone who had already concluded that the institution managing her father's legacy was not fully serving the interests of truth. Paris wasn't the only one who kept her distance. Janet Jackson, Michael's sister, one of the most famous women in the history of popular music, also refused to participate, despite invitations from the production team. According to LaToya Jackson, Janet had kindly declined to be included. Michael's siblings Randy and Rebby also do not appear. Janet Jackson's absence carries particular weight here, and not just because of her fame. Janet was there. She lived through the Jackson 5 years that the film depicts. She was in those rehearsal rooms, on those tour buses, watching her brother become something the world had never seen before. If anyone could have validated the emotional truth of the film's early scenes, it would have been her. She was invited. She said no. LaToya Jackson, speaking at the premiere, addressed her sister's decision carefully, saying Janet had kindly declined. No elaboration, no further explanation offered. But that phrase, kindly declined, is doing a lot of work. It suggests a conversation happened. It suggests Janet was asked, considered it, and chose not to be part of it, not publicly at least. When someone with that level of direct knowledge of the story chooses to stay out of the room, it's worth asking why. Think about who is absent: Janet Jackson, Randy Jackson, Rebby Jackson, Paris Jackson, Biggie in any meaningful capacity. These are not peripheral figures. These are the people closest to Michael Jackson, by blood, by history, by decades of shared experience. When the people who actually knew someone stay away from the film about that person, what does that tell you? It's worth being precise about what Paris was and wasn't doing. She wasn't campaigning against the film. She wasn't organizing a boycott. She said more than once, "You're probably going to love it. Go enjoy it." She understood exactly why her father's fan base would respond to the version of the story being told. She even predicted it. What she was doing was something more specific, insisting on the right to say that her experience of the truth was different from what was being presented on screen. That's not a fan complaining online. That's a witness. And the difference between those two things matters enormously when the subject is someone as mythologized, as contested, and as endlessly debated as Michael Jackson. Here's the image that keeps returning when you look at this whole situation. Two children of Michael Jackson. Same father, same upbringing, same impossible burden of growing up as his kids in the full glare of the world. One walks onto a film set every day, watches his cousin transform into a version of his father he never got to see perform live, and experiences something that feels like a form of healing. One reads a script, identifies what she believes are inaccuracies and dishonesty, gets ignored, and spends more than a year quietly watching from the sidelines before finally saying, "This is not what I would have chosen, and I want you to know that." Both responses are human, both are understandable, but the existence of both responses at the same time, within the same family, tells you something essential. The story of Michael Jackson is not a single story. It never was. Prince himself said he hoped the film would give people a glimpse into his father's life, because his father is probably one of the most misunderstood people in history. Even with full access, even as executive producer, watching every day on set, what Prince hopes people get is a glimpse. Not the full picture, a glimpse. Maybe that's the most honest thing anyone connected to this film has said. The Michael Jackson biopic is by most accounts technically accomplished. The production enlisted Michael's original collaborators, drummer Jonathan Moffat, guitarist Jennifer Batten, co-choreographer Vincent Patterson, to recreate key performances. Jafar Jackson's work has been called uncanny, but the film ends in 1988. Everything that came after is reserved for a sequel that may or may not get made. And in the meantime, Michael Jackson's daughter is on record saying the first film contains inaccuracies and full-blown lies. The estate is on record saying she doesn't understand how the industry works. Prince is on record saying he hopes people understand his father a little better. Janet Jackson quietly declined to participate, and Biggie showed up to a premiere in Germany and said nothing. What you do with all of that is up to you. Whether Paris is right about specific inaccuracies, whether the estate's version is more accurate, whether Prince's emotional experience validates or complicates her objections, these questions don't have clean answers, and this conversation isn't really only about Michael Jackson. It's about what happens every time Hollywood takes a real person's life and shapes it into a narrative arc with a beginning, a middle, and an ending, designed to leave an audience feeling something specific. It happened with Freddie Mercury. It happened with Elvis Presley. It happened with Ray Charles, with Judy Garland, with Johnny Cash. In every single case, people who were close to those individuals said, "That's not quite right. Some details are wrong. Some choices were made to protect certain interests. Some inconvenient truths were smoothed over." And in every single case, audiences went anyway, because the myth is often more compelling than the reality, and Hollywood knows that better than anyone. Paris Jackson knows it too. That's exactly what she said. The film she predicted panders to fans who still live in the fantasy, and those fans are going to be happy with it. She was right. The film opened to a 97% audience approval score on Rotten Tomatoes. The fantasy was what people wanted. What does seem clear is this: the people closest to Michael Jackson are not in agreement about what his story is, what it means, or how it should be told. And any film, no matter how official, how authorized, how expensive, that presents one version as the definitive version is making a choice. Paris Jackson saw that choice being made. She said something about it, and she was told to move on. The truth is rarely as simple as the headlines make it seem. So here's what I want to know from you. Do you think Paris Jackson is right, that the biopic is a controlled, sanitized version of the truth? Or do you think Prince's approach, fully embracing the film, is the more meaningful response? Drop your answer in the comments. And if you've already seen it, tell me, did you walk out feeling like you finally understood Michael Jackson? Or did something feel missing? Because I think that question is exactly what this whole story is really about.